Fellow Freedom fans, David Allen Carmichael again, back here with Preservative Talk Radio on Nuga Radio. Is Bivens a bust? What is Bivens? Is Bivens a bust? 1971, Bivens versus 6 unnamed agents. And I was reading from the case earlier, and essentially, Bivens was this case where a bunch of federal officers kicked in a guy's door, did other things. He violated his Fourth Amendment rights, among other things. And so Mr. Bivens sued these 6 unknown agents. Don't know their names. In our case, we're arguing over that issue right now in our case that hypothetically could go to the U.S. Court of Appeals. Where the case was mooted, they said, well, you've already won too much. The government appears to be changing their conduct. They're not being as mean as they used to be. So since they're not being used to me, you've essentially achieved something, so just shut up and go away. And we're saying, no, we have unknown agents who are violating the law willfully, deliberately, not just not paying attention. They're being sneaky about it. They're being deliberate. And they know the consequence. They know the consequence is our injury. And they're pretty much, they think they're immune. Well, this Bivens case came in and sued these 6 unknown agents. These guys cloaked behind anonymity. So let's see what this case said. It says the mere invocation of federal power by a federal law enforcement official will normally render futile any attempt to resist an unlawful entry or arrest by resort to the local police. I mean, in reality, local courts will do that. I had a case where I'm suing for a declaratory judgment in Virginia, and they said, no, well, there's a federal statute here. Well, duh, federal statute actually doesn't preempt the state law that protects religion. But it's a federal law. Well, what about the federal law? Okay, it's violating both. So, well, yeah, but because it's federal, the court, will not exercise power. That's exactly what the local police will do unless they are, one of these groups of the constitutional sheriffs, unless they know their power, their oath to God to uphold the Constitution. Everybody has the ambition competing against ambition who's under an oath. And if you're a people, you have the ambition to compete against ambition, to stand against, it's called interpose, against unlawful use of power. Without authority use of power. That's tyranny. You have a duty to stand against tyranny. But look what it says. This federal court in Bivens said that the local police aren't going to do anything. And a claim of authority to enter is likely to unlock the door as well. So, I don't really understand what that means. But let's continue. In such cases, there is no safety for the citizen except in the protection of the judicial tribunals for rights which have been invaded by the officers of the government professing to act in its name. There remains to him but the alternative of resistance, which may amount to crime. So, and then they cite United States versus Lee. So one of the things that some people understand, but most police officers don't, that a person has the right, a natural right and duty to resist unlawful encroachment. Otherwise, you voluntarily acquiesce and you have no standing to take action. So here in Bivens Court, they recognize, listen, the only way you're going to get protection, you can't stop the guy from kicking in your door. He's got a gun. If you try to stop, even though you have a duty and you have a right to stop him from unlawfully damaging your property, using the appropriate force that's equal to the threat, if you do that, if you give him old equipoise, he's going to take you down. He's going to, like a mean dog, urinate on you. He's going to alpha male you, whether he's a man or a woman, and he's going to try to subdue you and make you pay for having the audacity to stand in equipoise. That's what we see happening. So here in the Bivens case, I believe that the United States Supreme Court properly recognized that when people are abusing their power without authority, that the court has a duty. And I'll tell you what the duty is. We're going to go back and read it again. Section 1331 of the United States Code, Title 28, Section 1331. The district courts shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions arising under the Constitution, laws, or treaties of the United States. Under the Constitution, laws, or treaties of the United States. And what language are they playing off of there? Article 3, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, comma, the laws of the United States, comma, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. And then there's this little hyphenated section. It goes into some details. So the one section of word is that they left out in the statute says, district court shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions arising under the Constitution, laws, or treaties of the United States. So law and equity is in the Constitution. So they left it out of the statute, but they didn't leave it out of the statute. So law and equity, that's absolute right, absolute wrong. So if somebody punches you in the nose, that's an absolute wrong. That's law. Congress doesn't have to write a statute. That's the law of nature. It's the common law. It's the law of immemorial. It's law. It's absolute. And then the laws of equity, it's the scales in balance. So here's a statute that says the district court has jurisdiction. Bivens says you can sue somebody. So what I'm going to do now, and the whole purpose of this just treatise here, is to warn you there's something I didn't know about this, but I'm going to have to face it in our case, say hypothetically, if we file an appeal by notice by May 20th. There's this case called Eckbert versus Boulay. And in the case, a federal agent came up and beat a guy up. I mean, he basically is encountering a guy on his property, invading the man's car, questioning the man's guest. There was a little bit of drama behind it. Mr. Boulay had made the government aware of the person who was in his car, but Mr. Boulay's business was going to fail if the government accosted people that he was upon whom he was informing when they do it right in his driveway. So he was contesting, and all of a sudden he gets beat up by the federal agent. So he went to sue, used the Federal Tort Claims Act, which allows you to go to the executive agency itself to complain about an executive's action. Now, that's not constitutional judicial remedy. That is biblical. If you have an offense, go to somebody and try to make things straight. If he doesn't hear you, take 2 or more witnesses. If he doesn't hear that, take him before the church. If he doesn't have that, treat him like a publican and a sinner. That's due process. So going to a executive agency about an executive misbehavior isn't redress of government, right? It's the fox hanging out with the hens or whatever. So that's not legit redress, but it's a exhausting administrative remedies. But once that administrative remedy exhausted, that's why they have courts. They're objective, ambition competing against ambition. The courts need to show why they're there. They have to justify their existence. And hopefully we've appointed justices who have justice in mind and are worried more about that than their paycheck. So that's why you have courts. So let me show you what's happening right now in the United States Supreme Court that is grossly dangerous. That is a terror. Actually, it's a terror to me because, well, let me just read it. Says in Bivens, the court held that it had authority to create damages action against federal agents for violating the plaintiff's Fourth Amendment rights. No, it's not true. It's a case in Law and Equity that requires relief, folks. Over the next decade, the court also fashioned new causes of action under the Fifth Amendment, see such and such, and the Eighth Amendment. Since then, the court has come to appreciate more fully the tension between judicially created cause of action and the Constitution's separation of legislative and judicial powers. There's the truth speak. There's the 1984 truth speak. The Supreme Court is calling a judicial action as creating a remedy. The remedy is the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, and its applicable statute, and, basically giving it force of law, Title 28, Section 1331, that says the district courts have original jurisdiction in these all cases, and it goes on to basically cite words right out of the Article 3 Constitution. So it says the Constitution's separation of legislative and judicial powers. We see the court has declined 11 times to apply a similar cause of action, blah, blah, blah. So the analysis of a proposed Bivens claim proceeds in two steps. A court asks whether the case presents a new Bivens context. So now what this thing is explaining is the Supreme Court is saying to itself and to lower courts, hey, we don't like this Bivens thing because it shows that if a federal officer comes up and punches you in the nose, that federal officer can be sued. And it's going to affect their job performance. It's going to affect their job pay scale. It's going to affect their retirement. And we don't like that. So we're not going to tolerate looking at this thing's quoting Bivens anymore if it presents a new context. In other words, okay, he got lucky on his Fourth Amendment claim, but don't use it on the First Amendment or the Fifth Amendment or the Eighth Amendment or any other injury. Don't you do it. So that's what they've told the lower courts. If it has a new context, chunk it, get rid of it, dismiss it. And second, let's just say it doesn't have a new context. Second, if so, if special factors indicate the judiciary is at least arguably less equipped than Congress to weigh the costs and benefits of allowing a damages action to proceed. Now, I'm giving you a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo there, but what they're saying is, wait a minute, we have to think about this. Is the Congress able to come up with a statute that'll spell out a very detailed process for suing somebody? Or can we courts just make it up as we go? Yes, you can. The Congress has already done it. Title 28, Section 1331 gave you original jurisdiction. That's Article 3 of the Constitution, which mentioned law and equity, and then the laws of the United States. So until Congress tells you you can't, which may be a violation of the Constitution, unless they try some way to manage your power, to take the common law and refine it into something that's more sensical to the situations at hand. You don't just have the power. If you have the power, you have the duty to exercise it. And how does this affect you? Chattanooga, northwestern Georgia, northeastern Alabama. How does it affect you? It affects you because if the jackboots, Nazis, kick in your door and take you off to the gulag, you can't sue them. And they take you for 5-10 years, and you sue them, and they say, oh, clumsy me, we kept you in the gulag for 10 years. Go home. Go home. Go ahead. Go home. But then you can't sue them to make it so they'll never want to do it again. There's our problem. It's happening right now. Your children and your grandchildren are threatened by this. It's not in the news. It needs to be discussed. And if it weren't for the Shangri-La of freedom, you might not be hearing it. But we've got more things in store from the people of Chattanooga than maybe the rest of the nation's ready for. Fellow Freedom fans, I'm David Allen Carmichael back. Very heady conversation today, very important conversation today. Thank you for tuning in to Nuclear Radio Network. And this is, take notes, get ready. And again, I want to motivate you. We're in a crisis. Have you noticed that people walk around with purple hair? There's nothing wrong with purple hair. However, let's admit it. There's a crisis going on. It's like purple hair crisis. Oh, I'm a chrysophobe. I'm a purple hairophobe. No, I'm not. But when I see people marring their bodies and marring their faces, and especially as a teenager, and I've just known a lot of teenagers in the last maybe 40 years doing youth ministry. And when I'm watching teenagers in crisis, and I see this, this association with marring themselves, because there's an inner wound, and there needs to be an outlet, and sometimes the outlet is a marring of what, because they have, let's say, an image of themselves which is false, and their false image causes them to damage their image. So there's things going on. It's getting worse. It's getting crazier. You're having women dressing up like guys and being confused about their beautiful creation that they are. And they're accepting lies, and and by the way, there's an adversary, a spiritual adversary, that's capable of influencing you spiritually, even to the point of motivating you to do their job of stealing, killing, and destroying. So it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And until you and I stand up in faith, obedience, and sacrifice, and stand against it and take back the land, as my wife said a week ago to a group of 26 teenagers, dig up the wells of our Father. Let's clean out these gumped up wells. It got a bunch of feces thrown into it and a bunch of debris, and we're going to clean this stuff out and get access to clean living water. That's what we need. So I want you to learn to enjoy this. We're going to read from a case. It's called Egbert. And here's this quote here I want you to listen to. It says, further, under the court's precedents, a court may not fashion a Bivens remedy if Congress already has provided or has authorized the executive to provide an alternative remedial structure. Liar, liar, pants on fire, hanging on the telephone wire. I'm getting bold here. I'm saying, hello, U.S. Supreme Court. Where have you been? What are you thinking? What's going on here? If there's an administrative remedy biblically, that means you're exhausting every administrative remedy before you go to the court. That's legit. It's biblical. If you have an offense against anyone, go to them and confront them. And if they don't hear you, take 2 or more witnesses. That's an appeal. So you go to the executive, and they may have an appeal process within there. But then when that's done, or say you could take it to the appeals court if it's an agency, and then what's the appeal? To the appeals court. Otherwise, there's no appeal to the appeals court. You have a direct action. If it's not spelled out by statute that way, you have a direct action to the person in district court, subject to or pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 1331. And if they don't hear you, those 2 or panel of 3 judges, 2 or more witnesses, right? They're being safe by giving you a panel of 3 judges, 2 or more witnesses, and they don't hear you there, then you take it to the church. That's called, some call it en banc. You get the whole circuit court, all of the judges together, and you say, listen, there's something going on here, and you guys need to scrutinize this and give me remedy, give me justice, establish justice, not just for me, for everybody who's following after me. Okay, so you write it on a stone so people can read it, and so they know how to run with it from this point forward. These are biblical precepts. Our whole judicial system is based on things that were laid out for us in the Holy Bible. And we've got to first read the Bible and understand it. And now the structure comes to us. The secular mind out of Harvard Law School ain't doing it for you. Not since the late 19th century has the mindset of Harvard been actually establishing justice. So here at Preservative Talk Radio, we're going to establish justice because it needs to be established. I'm going to go on down here in this recent case called Eckbert. This Eckbert guy. And what happened is Eckbert beat up Mr. Boulay. Mr. Boulay went to the Federal Tort Claims Act, an executive, hey, I want to tell you, you need to correct your behavior and behavior of this guy. And they said, nah, shut up. Get out of here. We checked the block, had a kangaroo court, but shut up. Get out of here. Oh, by the way, clean up your bloody nose. Get your biohazard out of here. So he was in Eckbert. The Supreme Court said, nah, you're out of luck. You're out of luck. Okay, Mr. Bivens got away with it. He sued these 6 unnamed officers for the Fourth Amendment violation. But yours, we're not doing it anymore. We're just going to ignore it. So it says there's no Bivens cause of action for Mr. Boulay's First Amendment retaliation claim. Oh, I got to tell you the rest of the story. So, okay, now what happens? Okay, this is why this is important. You got to see what happened to Mr. Boulay. So Mr. Boulay, he gets beat up by the police officer. He goes under the Federal Tort Claims Act, makes a complaint in the executive agency about the U.S. officers, the United States officers' violence toward him in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And then he fails in the claim. It's kangaroo court. Just shut up. Leave us alone. So what does Mr. Eckbert do? Mr. Eckbert calls the IRS and has them investigate him. He calls the local city, whatever, has them investigate him. He calls a whole bunch of agencies to come and harass and harangue. Talk about malicious prosecution. To injure or annoy, says the American jurisprudence we talked about the other day. And so he throws him under the bus. Now, some of our listening audience that I know are listening to the show have experienced this, who've had false claims made against them, and they get taken away in the hoosgow, and while they're in the hoosgow, their property is being destroyed. So people, this is really happening in America. This sounds very mafioso, and it is. It's an organized crime, and they're chuckling their way off to their bank and their vacation land because they're doing it with taxpayer dollars. So Mr. Boulay complains, Federal Tort Claims Act, through an executive thing, turn him down, and then Eckbert gets even. So they say, oh, he doesn't have any retaliation, being retaliated as an injury to his rights under the First Amendment, his right to redress government. So that's what the court has said here. Now, if Mr. Eckbert doesn't have any protection whatsoever from the jackboots who are hired by the United States off United States tax dollars, then you do not have any protection. There's no incentive whatsoever for these guys to not violate the law. Now, I only have so many minutes, and this is going to come up again, but I'm going to try to do it only in small pieces around other information. So today, because this is an emergency, this is like the emergency broadcast system kind of thing of warning of a tornado. This is a civil corruption warning. I'm going to quote from somebody who I'm not too impressed with when I saw them put this lady on the Supreme Court. It's Justice Sotomayor who dissented from the mainstream position in Eckbert. And I was actually, I think the reason why I'm not a fan of Justice Sotomayor is because when she had been promoted into the U.S. Supreme Court, she'd come up with some case law that her opinions, and I was very, again, not being a Supreme Court justice myself, I could easily scrutinize and show that man, she's not connecting the dots. And you may disagree with me here, but at least you see that I'm approaching this stuff on a constitutional basis, a biblical basis, and the basis is right versus wrong. This is what she says. The court goes to extraordinary lengths to avoid the result of basically making it so that Mr. Boulet's property rights can't be redressed in the United States courts. It rewrites a legal standard established just 5 years ago, stretches national security concerns beyond recognition, and discerns an alternative remedial structure where none exists. The court's innovations taken together enable it to close the door to Boulet's claim and presumably to others that fall squarely within Bivens' ambit. Today's decision does not overrule Bivens. It nevertheless contravenes precedent and will strip many more individuals who suffer injuries at the hands of other federal officers and whose circumstances are materially indistinguishable from those in Bivens of an important remedy. Amen. You got it, Justice Sotomayor. Let's give credit where credit is due. So Boulet complained to his superiors about the violation. So this is what happened to him. So about the incident, filed administrative claim, which prompted Egbert to retaliate. Egbert contacted the Internal Revenue Service, Social Security Administration, Washington State Department of Licensing, and the Whatcom County Assessor's Office, asking them to investigate Boulet's business. These agencies did so, but none found that Boulet had done something wrong. Boulet paid over $5,000 to his accountant to assist him in responding to the IRS tax audit. Boulet also filed claims pursuant to the Federal Tort Claims Act, which were denied. Their investigation of Egbert concluded. Now, this was the Federal Tort Claims Act, the whatever Bureau of Police investigation of Agent Egbert concluded that he failed to be forthcoming with investigators and demonstrated lack of integrity, serious offenses that warranted his removal. Whether he was removed or not, two different things, because it turns out that they dismissed Mr. Boulet's claim. Boulet's Fourth Amendment excessive fort claim is part and parcel of the common and recurrent sphere of law enforcement that remained a permissible area for Bivens' claim, says Sotomayor. The court separately held that Boulet's First Amendment claim could proceed under Bivens. That was the appeals court. But the Supreme Court knocked it out, said, no, you can't do it. We are not going to give you relief. We're going to say that our entertaining your lawsuit against the wicked man who takes the power, the force of being an emissary of the living God as a minister of our good, and he's going to take that force for good, and he's going to use it for evil, and he's going to injure you, and he's going to get good at it. And then, oh, by the way, if you complain about it, he'll give you another punch. Oh, he'll give you another punch in the nose. That's kind of a mandatory, involuntary turning the other cheek. Hello, Supreme Court. Look what I read. Article 3, Section 2. Judicial power shall extend. Congress doesn't need to do anything else. Shall extend to all cases in law and equity. That's natural law. That's justice. That's equal balance. If the law doesn't provide for it, you go to equity and you put the weight on the scales and you see what will make things in balance as far as justice is concerned. So those things arising under this Constitution, laws of the United States, treaties made. So now I go to the Act of Congress. What did they say? The district court shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions arising under the Constitution, laws, or treaties of the United States. The Congress, Supreme Court, have you lost your mind? Have you gone into a fog? Am I the only one? Is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? Is there not a giant? And somebody needs to take a sling and a stone and bop them in the head. Ring their bell a little bit. Stay tuned to Nooga Radio Network and come back to Preservative Talk Radio as often as you can. So that's it, folks. You watched a video of me doing a radio broadcast, and I appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, please like. I need some likes. I need some subscribes. Now I will tell you that there's people that have told me, send me emails. Oh, I liked your show. I love the one about this, and didn't like on YouTube or whatever venue that, that it was being portrayed. And sometimes Mr. Carmichael, who is being paid attention to, it may invite somebody to pay attention to you as well. So there's where I understand that sometimes if you like, somebody can track you back, and advanced intelligence will know who it is that cites. Besides, they can track what you've already done on the internet and how much time you've spent listening to this. So that's, so give us a like if you could. Share it with your friends, and pray for us. Pray for our case, Carmichael versus Pompeo, who hypothetically may or may not become Carmichael versus Blinken.